All right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time we're heading back in time to explore the Ottoman Empire. And we're really zeroing in on the reign of, I think it's safe to say, its most famous Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent. We've got a bunch of interesting sources here. So we've got some YouTube videos kind of revealing some interesting facts, a Wikipedia article to give us a good overview, and another video that really digs into his rise to power.
When you say famous, it's interesting. In the West, we celebrate him as the Magnificent, but in his own realm, he earned the title the Lawgiver, which I think really says a lot about his complicated legacy.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? I mean, the lawgiver, that's really something. I mean, he ruled for 46 years. Think about that. 46 years. That's a period when the Ottoman Empire was at its peak, really, from 1520 to 1566. We're talking major expansion, incredible cultural achievements, a real turning point in history. I mean, he's known for all of these military victories, but what really struck me when I was looking at these sources is that he was a reader. He loved poetry.
That's right. In fact, there was a Venetian envoy who met Suleiman not long after he became sultan. He described him as this tall, slender guy, pretty tough though, with a sharp mind. The envoy noted that he loved reading and that he had a real reputation for knowledge and for thinking deeply about things. I mean, this is a far cry from how we often picture, like a ruthless Ottoman sultan.
Yeah. I mean, it really does challenge that kind of stereotypical image, doesn't it? And speaking of those military conquests, I mean, this guy personally led his armies on campaigns across 3 continents.
3 continents, yeah.
It's easy to just say that and kind of gloss over it, but I mean, 3 continents.
And the campaigns were pretty amazing. Like, take the capture of Belgrade in 1521, for example. Now, this wasn't just some, random military victory. This strategically opened up the way for the Ottomans to push deeper into Europe.
And then there was Rhodes, which was this island stronghold held by the Knights Hospitaller. They were like this powerful Christian military order.
Oh yeah, the Knights Hospitaller, the Siege of Rhodes. That was a long and really fierce battle, but in the end, Suleiman's forces they took it. But what I find really interesting is that even though he won, he let the knights leave peacefully, which I mean, it suggests that maybe he wasn't all about just conquest and brutality.
Right. It was a little more nuanced than that. Like he may have even had a kind of respect for a worthy opponent,
Yeah.
But his ambitions didn't stop at Rhodes, though, did they?
No, not at all. Suleiman's next target was Hungary. And this led to, I'm sure you've heard of it, the famous Battle of Mohacs in 1526. And this was a decisive victory. It basically crippled the Hungarians for years.
Yeah. It's easy to get caught up in the sheer scale of these battles. But, I read that Suleiman was actually saddened by the death of the Hungarian king, Louis II, who was killed in the battle.
It's an interesting detail. It humanizes him a bit, doesn't it? It reminds us that these historical figures, they weren't just one-dimensional. Even in the middle of all these conquests, there could still be a sense of sorrow, maybe even a kind of respect for an enemy who had fallen. And the Battle of Mohacs really did reshape the whole balance of power in the region. The Ottomans they were really dominant.
And he didn't stop there. He wanted recognition on the world stage. He even went so far as to claim the title of Caesar. Caesar, the real emperor, especially after there was this treaty with the Habsburgs that referred to Charles V, their Holy Roman Emperor, as just, the King of Spain.
That seems like a small detail, right? But it was really a symbolic victory for Suleiman. It shows just how ambitious he was, how well he understood the power dynamics in Europe, and how much he wanted to be seen as an equal or even better to the big powers in the West.
It's like he was trying to rewrite history, to put himself right at the center. And you can really see that drive in his next move, which was, let's just say, pretty audacious. The 1529 siege of Vienna.
Can you imagine how shocking that was for Europe? I mean, an Ottoman army right there at the gates of Vienna is totally unprecedented. It was like everything they knew was being challenged. But the siege, it didn't work out. It actually ended up being Suleiman's first major setback. It really makes you think about how history might have been different if he'd actually succeeded there.
It really does. It makes you wonder if that failure, if it kind of fueled his ambition even more. I mean, he certainly didn't just sit back and relax after that. He kept going with those military campaigns, and he just kept getting more powerful, both in Europe and in the East.
And don't forget, it wasn't just about military conquests either. He was really involved in running the empire and its legal system, which is how he got that title, the Lawgiver, back home.
Oh, absolutely. We definitely need to talk more about that because he made some really significant legal reforms. He even took steps to protect minority groups, like he issued this decree that basically denounced blood libels against Jewish people living in the empire.
That's that's remarkable for the time. It really shows that our assumptions about these powerful rulers, they're not always accurate.
Yeah. There was definitely more to this guy than meets the eye. We've talked about the warrior, the lawgiver, but there's another side we can't ignore, the art lover.
This is where his love for reading and all that knowledge really comes into play. Under his patronage, Ottoman art and culture, it just blossomed. He supported these artistic societies that brought in all these talented people, not just from the empire, but from all over the place.
And of course, we have to mention the Suleymaniye Mosque, it's really a monument to Suleiman's vision. And of course, we can't forget the architect Mimar Sinan, who was just brilliant. And get this, Suleiman was a poet himself. He wrote poems in Persian and Turkish under the pen name Wuhibi, which it means lover.
His poetry really gives us a glimpse into his soul. It shows this deep emotion and sensitivity that you wouldn't really expect from a military leader like him. He even wrote this chronogram to remember the death of his son Mehmed. When you add up the numerical value of the letters in the phrase "peerless among princes, my Sultan Mehmed," it matches the year 1543 in the Islamic calendar, which is the year his son passed away.
Oh, wow. That's incredibly moving. It really speaks to, just how complex he was as a person and how deeply he loved his family.
Yeah, it highlights how important language was in the Ottoman Empire and how it could be used to express really profound meaning.
Yeah. And speaking of family, that brings us to, well, one of the most fascinating and definitely the most tragic parts of Suleiman's life.
Hmm.
All the intrigue surrounding his sons and the whole question of who would succeed him.
Yeah, this is where the story takes a real dramatic turn. It's a story of ambition, rivalry, and in the end, it's really a story of heartbreak.
Okay, so we have this incredibly powerful ruler, right? And this empire that's just flourishing. But and this happens a lot with powerful families, the question of who takes over, who inherits everything, it becomes this huge source of tension. And in Suleiman's case, it was a tragedy. And what makes it even more complicated is that the Ottomans, they didn't really have like a clear system for who would inherit the throne.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Unlike the European monarchies where they had, these set rules about the oldest son inheriting, the Ottoman system was way more fluid and that often led to these power struggles, all this uncertainty. So yeah, not having a clear system, it definitely added to all the drama that was unfolding, within Suleiman's family.
It's almost like something out of Shakespeare. Suleiman he had a bunch of sons, but only four of them actually lived to be adults. Mustafa, Selim, Bayezid, and Cihankir. And each one of them, they could have been the future of the empire, right?
And we can't forget about Herm Sultan. She was Suleiman's legal wife and the mother of three of these potential heirs, Selim, Bayezid, and Cihangir. She had real power, even though she didn't have, like an official public role or anything.
Her story is just, it's amazing. She was definitely not just, some random person in the harem. It's fascinating how much historians debate about about how much she influenced things, especially when it came to the succession and her own sons getting the throne.
Oh, her influence was huge, that's for sure. We don't have hard proof that she was directly involved in everything that happened, but a lot of historians think that she was really good at shaping how people saw the whole succession thing, maybe even, kind of promoting her own sons while making their rivals look bad.
It's hard not to see the parallels with other royal courts throughout history, right?
Yeah.
It's like this never-ending story of intrigue, ambition, and all these whispers of conspiracies. And all that leads us to the really tragic fate of Mustafa, who was Suleiman's oldest son.
Right. Mustafa, he was really popular. A lot of people thought he would be the next sultan, but then all these rumors started swirling around, accusations that he was plotting against his father.
Well, yeah, thinking about all the power dynamics, it makes you wonder where those rumors came from. Was it real, or was it, like this planned campaign to make him look bad?
That's the big question, right? We don't know for sure what happened with Mustafa. It's all pretty murky, but a lot of people think that Rustam Pasha, who was Hurrem Sultan's son-in-law and a pretty powerful guy in the court, that he was pulling some strings. manipulating the whole
Oh,
situation.
yeah, a son-in-law right in the middle of all the court intrigue. I mean, that wouldn't be a first.
Yeah.
So what happened to Mustafa? Did Suleiman actually believe those accusations?
Sadly, it seems like he did. In 1553, Suleiman was on a campaign against Persia, and he called Mustafa to his tent. And when Mustafa walked in, he was ambushed and strangled to death by Suleiman's own eunuchs.
That's, I mean, it's brutal. It really shows you just how violent things were back then and how far people would go in these power struggles. And it's so different from, the Suleiman we were talking about earlier who was sad about the death of that enemy king.
Power does strange things to people, doesn't it? A lot of people think that Suleiman, he really regretted what happened, but I mean, it was too late. And killing Mustafa, it cast a shadow over the rest of Suleiman's reign.
And this horrible thing, it didn't even solve the problem of who would be sultan, did it? It's like it just created more problems, more rivalry between Suleiman's other sons.
Exactly. The competition between Seaman and Bayezid, who were, Herman Sultan's two sons who were still alive, it got so much worse. It turned into a full-blown civil war. They both got their supporters, their armies, and it stopped being just a family fight and became this fight for the whole empire.
And this whole conflict just shows you how unstable the Ottoman system was when it came to choosing the next ruler. It wasn't just about personal ambition. It was about who would control the empire, all its resources, its entire future.
It was about the very heart of the Ottoman world, yeah. Selim, he had his father's support, and he ended up winning, defeating Bayezid in a battle near Konya in 1559. Bayezid, he knew he was losing, so he took a huge gamble and fled to Persia, which was, the Ottomans' biggest enemy.
Wow. I mean, that must have been so humiliating for Suleiman to have his own son run off to his enemy for protection.
It was a risky move, that's for sure, and it didn't pay off. Suleiman, he couldn't let that slide. He basically told the Safavid Shah, the Persian ruler, look, you either hand over Bayezid or you kill him.
Wow. That shows you how powerful Suleiman was, how determined he was to be in control, even when it came to his own family.
So the Shah, well, Suleiman bribed him, paid him a lot of money, and the Shah agreed to execute Bayezid.
Yeah.
So in 1561, Bayezid and his four sons, they were executed by Ottoman agents.
What a sad ending to a story that, started out with so much hope. It also shows you just how ruthless the Ottomans could be, how practical they were, even when it was awful.
Yeah. With Bayezid gone, there was no one left to challenge Selim's claim to the throne. So when Suleiman died in 1566, Selim became the new sultan. He inherited this vast empire that his father had built through his conquests, his reforms, but also, through his ruthlessness.
It's a reminder that even the most impressive rulers, their reigns are often filled with tragedy and really difficult choices.
Suleiman's story reminds us that history is never straightforward. It's like a tapestry with these threads of greatness and ambition, but also these darker threads of loss, betrayal, and just the harsh realities of power.
It really makes you think about the real cost of power and what it means to rule a huge empire like that.
And it forces us to think about, what it means to be human, about ambition and love, and how the choices we make, they can have these really tragic consequences.
So we've explored, really the heights of Suleiman's reign, the expansion, all the cultural achievements, the legal reforms, but also, all the darker stuff, the family intrigue, and just how brutal power could be. What I find so interesting is that, even today, historians are still debating and analyzing his legacy.
Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about next. We're going to dig into Suleiman's lasting impact and how historians are looking at him today, through the lens of modern scholarship.
So much to unpack. We've covered Suleiman's conquests, his reforms, his love for the arts, and that whole family drama. It's a lot. So where does that leave us? What's his impact, long term? How do historians see him today?
Well, that's a question that people are still really debating and rethinking. It's easy to, kind of fall into this trap of seeing Suleiman's reign as like the high point of the Ottoman Empire, right? And then like everything after that was just decline. And actually some of the Ottoman historians who came after him, they kind of pushed that idea. They presented his rule as this golden age, and everything else had to be compared to that.
Yeah, it's like the old good old days thing. It never goes away, no matter what time period, what culture.
Exactly. But historians today, they look at things differently. They get that Suleiman's reign was a time of incredible power, a lot of wealth, but But the Ottomans, they didn't just like fall apart after he died. They kept going, they kept changing, they adapted for centuries, dealing with all these new challenges and new opportunities.
So it's not as simple as like a rise and fall, right?
Yeah.
It's more complicated than that. It's about continuity, change, this real resilience.
Exactly. You can't just, give all the credit to one person, even someone as powerful as Suleiman. It oversimplifies history, makes it too easy. You have to think about all the people involved, all the social, economic, political stuff going on and how the empire was able to navigate a world that was constantly changing.
Yeah. It's a good point. It's never just about one person. Even those amazing buildings, the architecture we talked
Yeah.
about. Yeah, Suleiman commissioned them, but it was Mimar Sinan's genius
Yeah.
that designed them, and all those skilled artisans who actually built them.
You got it. And it's the same with the legal reforms, the military victories, even the art and culture. Those were group efforts, It took talent, vision, and people working together all across Ottoman society.
So how do we make sense of Suleiman's legacy? With all these different sides to it. What are the big things someone should remember if they're trying to understand this really important figure?
I mean, there's no question that he had a huge impact. His military campaigns, they made the Ottoman Empire bigger than it had ever been. His legal reforms, they shaped Ottoman society for hundreds of years. And he supported the arts in a way that created this golden age of art and architecture. I mean, those are facts.
And all that personal stuff too, right? The poetry, his thing for tulips, all that family drama.
Yeah, all of it. It paints a picture of this really complex person, someone who represents both the greatness and the ruthlessness of the time, He was a conqueror, a lawgiver, a patron of the arts, a loving husband and father, but he was also a ruler who could be incredibly cruel.
And it's that complexity, I think, that makes him so fascinating. He makes us think about the nuances of historical figures and not try to put them in these simple categories.
That's so important. We can't judge people from the past by our standards today. To understand Suleiman, we have to understand his world, the challenges, the opportunities, everything.
Right. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you'd like our listeners to think about? What's the question that Suleiman's legacy leaves us with?
I think it's this. How do we deal with the fact that historical figures often seem to contradict themselves? Suleiman the Magnificent, he was a conqueror and a supporter of the arts. He had immense power, but he also experienced these deep personal tragedies. His story makes us confront the complicated nature of the past, to see the nuances and to understand that history is rarely simple. It's more like a tapestry with all these different shades.
Wow. That's something to think about. And I have a feeling this isn't the last time we'll be talking about Suleiman the Magnificent.
Thanks for joining us on this trip through Ottoman history. We hope it's made you want to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.